We'll start with an opening song, Peace Like a River on page 78 for those who have books. For peace like a river, peace like a river. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. We just sang a song, Peace, and his name too was Peace, Shanti. Death is horrendous, but it has been demonized. In fact, religion and all search has emerged from knowing what death is. All religions have emerged from this inquiry. I'll read from one of the Upanishads about a young boy who goes and meets death and extracts the secrets from him. The young boy had been given a boon, and his third question was, I'll chant it in the original and translate it for you. Yeyam prete vichikitsam manushe astiti nayam astiti chaike etad vidyam manushishtastvayaham varanam esha varastritiya. There is this doubt consequent on the death of a person. Some say that person exists. Some say the person does not exist. I would like to know, under your instructions, And the god of death says, Devairatrape vichikitsitam pura nahi suvigneya manuresha dharma anyam varam nachiketo vrinishva mamo parotsirati masrijainam. Regarding this question, even the gods entertain doubts since the days of yore. For being very subtle, this knowledge is not truly comprehended. O Nachiketa, ask for some other boon. Do not press me. Give up this boon of inquiry about death that is demanded of me. And then he shifts his entire focus on the idea of the imperishable reality. And from that standpoint, he speaks about death as Na jayate mriyate va vipaschin nayam kutaschin babuva kaschit ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. This intelligent self is neither born nor does it die. It did not originate from anything, nor did anything originate from it. This Atman, the self, is birthless, eternal, undecaying, and ancient. It is not killed even when the body is killed. The nature of this imperishable reality is Ashabdam asparsham arupam avyayam Tatarasam nityam gandhavachaya anadyanantam mahata param dhruvam nichayatan mrityu mukat pramuchyate. One becomes freed from the jaws of death by knowing that which is soundless, touchless, colorless, undiminishing, and also tasteless, eternal, odorless, without beginning and without end, distinct from the cosmic mind, and is ever constant. Parachakamān anuyanti balas te mrityuryanti vitatasya pasham atadhira amritatvam videtva dhruvam adhruveshva iha na prartayante. The unintelligent people follow the external desires. They get entangled in the snares of widespread death. Therefore, the discriminating people, having known what true immortality is in the midst of impermanent things, do not pray for anything here but immortality. Then the god of death is specific. Yonim anye prapadyante sharirattvaya dehina stanam anuyanyanti yata karma yata shrutam. Some souls enter the womb for acquiring bodies, and others follow the motionless in accordance with their karma and with their knowledge. Yada sarve pramuchante kamayesya hridishrita atam artyo mrito bhavati atra brahma samasnute. When all the desires clinging to one's heart fall off, then the mortal becomes immortal, and that mortal attains that Brahman year itself. Shatam chaika cha hridayasnadya tasam murdhanim abhinishhritaika tayorurdvam ayanamritatvamethi Vishwam anyot kramane bhavanti. The subtle mystic nerves originating from that mystical heart are 101 in number. Of them, one passes through the crown of the head. Going up through that subtle nerve, one gets immortality. The others that have different direction becomes the cause of death. He sums up this topic with meditation on that imperishable reality. Angushtamatra purusho Antaratma sada jananam Hriday sanniveshta Tam swang sharirat pravrihan Munjadiveshikam dhairyena Tam vidyam anushukram amritam Tam vidyam shukram amritamiti. That supreme indwelling self of the size of a thumb is ever seated in the hearts of all people. One should unerringly separate that reality from one's body like a stalk from a munja grass, a pith that is extracted from a long grass. One should know that imperishable reality as pure and immortal. One should know that reality as pure and immortal. Swami Atmajayananda, he took up this life to pursue this great search. That's the heart of all human endeavor, to unravel the final mysteries. He had come to Shri Ram Krishna, Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda, and they had assured us, you come to me, I'll save you. This, I believe, and I hope that today our brother who passed away has attained that state. There's no question of sadness. The question of joy and final release and the emergence in the reality that is a true self. Om, peace, peace, peace.
Wow. This is the biggest crowd we've had in quite some time. I think most of you know me, but my name is Scott Worth. I've been here at the center for quite a while. And I've had the privilege of knowing and living with Swami Atmajayananda for all those years. I'm going to refer to him as Shanti throughout the rest of what I have to say. That was, when he was asked, he always said he preferred to be called Shanti. I'm going to quickly go through what's on your sheet here. I probably first met him around 1978 or 1979. That's when I came here. He was in Portland, and when Swami Atmajayananda would come, he would often be the driver. Sometimes him, sometimes his brother monk, whose nickname was Sarada. And we got to know him, but you know, when you get to know a monk in this tradition, in the Eastern traditions, once they take the vows, the previous life kind of is let go. So a lot of what I've learned about Shanti's previous life has been rather recent, with the help of his family and so on and so forth. But he was born in Portland, Oregon. He's a Northwesterner. And we know that, and it's important that I say this actually, because I have something I'll follow up with. We know that in high school he was the captain of the high school skiing team, and that he pursued skiing through college. He was a competitive skier, and he had told me that he had won one major competition in Sun Valley or someplace. That's in your handout. He, of course, studied architecture at the Oregon State University, got his degree there, and among other things, which many of us, I wasn't aware of until recently, he designed his parents' house in Gresham, Oregon. They allowed him to design it as an architectural student. And in 2019, that house was placed in the National Register of Historic Places as a significant building in America. And we know that he enjoyed music quite a bit. You could see that with the flute. He joined the Vedanta Society in Portland in 1960 or so. And then in the early 60s, we're not sure of the time, he came here to live, to help Swami Vivedishananda, who was currently alone and needed help. And he became a probationer here in 1968, actually under Swami Vivedishananda. However, he returned to Portland in 1971. Another monk joined here. So he returned to Portland. He briefly came back to Seattle in 1980 when we had a building project going on. And then he permanently moved to Seattle in 1993, and he took his final vows in 2000. That's when he took on the name Swami Atmajayananda. Now, from 1993 until present, he established himself. He was established at our retreat property primarily. And he would come into town generally on Thursdays through Sundays and be here in town, and then go back to the retreat for the beginning of the week. And it's because of that I got to know him for many, many years. We share the same area upstairs, and so I lived with him half a week every week for years and years and years. But living with him and getting to know him as I got to know him over the last 2 years were two separate things. So I'm going to basically skip forward to April of 2021. Which is when we got a phone call from the retreat that said that Shanti is not doing well. And if you recall, April 2021 would have been about a year through the first shutdown and lockdown because of COVID. No one from the retreat had come here. We had not gone there. And Swami Atmajayananda and I went to the retreat, found Shanti, who was obviously in bad shape. We didn't know why. Those of you that have seen him know that his back developed quite a curve. And he was ailing. So we took him to the doctor, and he had a variety of problems. But they basically confirmed a diagnosis of multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. We did not know that he had initial. There were initial concerns about that. He had not communicated that to anyone, so it was news to us. But the multiple myeloma had advanced to an extent that they were willing to discuss treatment, but obviously it wasn't even the oncologist's first choice. His doctor and the oncologist both suggested hospice, and he readily acceded to it. In fact, he really didn't want treatment. If, they said to him, we could confirm this with a bone marrow biopsy, and he said, no, that's too invasive, So he readily went into hospice. He was ready to go into hospice, and his exact words, I remember them very well, is, that sounds like a good way to go. So, in May of 2022, we got him in hospice at the retreat property, and this was through an organization called Hospice of the Northwest, which we've since learned is a wonderful, wonderful organization. And they provided him with nurse visits every week, personal care assistant, a spiritual advisor. That might sound a little strange, a spiritual advisor for a monk, but this woman's name was Karuna. She was familiar with our society. She had been to events over the years when she lived in the Bay Area at the Vedanta Society of San Francisco. So, and they got along really well. So under the care of hospice, he had a variety of symptoms other than multiple myeloma, primarily having to do with fluid retention. But through hospice and through the palliative care that they gave him, he improved quite a bit in that period in hospice. The disease was not reversing or going into remission, but his overall physical condition was better. And he shed a tremendous amount of water out of his legs. They were very concerned about the water around his heart. That went away. And he did very well. He did so well that in a year they had to discharge him from hospice because the criteria for staying in hospice is decline, and he was not declining. His vitals were steady, his weight was steady at that point, and he had done that. Now, over the course of that year, he was taking drugs to cope with pain, which worked very well because he was not in that much pain. He would have, multiple myeloma is an awful disease that is very painful. But they discharged him, and that was around May. And we continued now through his doctor. What happens is the drugs he was getting for pain relief and things he continued to get, but it was through his doctor, and we got him those. During that period, it was a 6-month period when he was out of hospice. The one thing we took care of, I took him to the doctor. He had a bump on his leg, a lesion on his leg. It turned out to be squamous cell carcinoma. So since he wasn't in hospice, they had a surgeon take it out, and plastic surgeon. It was just an office visit, and he had that taken care of. It was bothering him. It would not have probably been a mortal concern, but it was bothering him. It irritated easily. But anyway, we had that done. But within 6 months, he started to decline again. It was a steep decline. And so we enrolled him in hospice again. They came out and evaluated him. He had lost weight. His vitals were somewhat different. And, they said, yes, he's done. So we had him put back into hospice. Now, at this time, he was at the retreat, but it became evident that we could not keep him at the retreat and properly take care of him. Through the first episode of hospice, he was able and willing and capable of administering his own medicines and so on and so forth. We found increasingly he was forgetting. I'd call him in the morning. I say, "Did you remember your medicine last night?" And he, "Oh, no, I didn't," so that became a concern. And his physical condition, and with this winter, the retreat just obviously was not a solution. So about the beginning of November, he entered hospice in the beginning of November. By the beginning of December, we had decided that we had to move him here. So we did, and he spent his last month here in Seattle. At first, it was just I would go over, or Swami Atmajayananda would go over, make sure he had a meal, make sure that everything was okay. We were able to then spend some time doing other things that we had to do. But very quickly it came to the point where he needed full-time care. And we actually retained an in-home health care service, and they came, which was a great relief to us. However, they came for one night before he passed away. And he passed away the next evening. So I want to end with just speaking. This was a journey. It was a journey for me. It was certainly the ultimate journey for him. But you learn things as you have these things, and you appreciate what other people are teaching you. So I want to mention just a few things. He was clearly unhappy with the world by the end. He was in pain. He wanted out. But never once did I hear him say, "Why me?" So, not once. And that is, I think, a sign of, really where he was at. During the course, especially the beginning of his hospice the first year, he pursued his interests. He continued to live his life. He didn't mope around. He was tweaking his music collection, and he was making drawings and putting together cardboard figures, architectural type little things, and reading books and wanting to discuss what he had read. And then one thing I learned, it was really interesting, because he had never spoke about this, but I went back and I mentioned his skiing and his architecture, and then he entered the monastery. And he actually, more than once, I heard him explain that to people. He explained it to me once. He explained it to Karuna, who was a spiritual advisor while I was there once. He said, I see this as 3 stages of my life. The first was working to attain some sort of physical accomplishment, the skiing. And the second was working towards some sort of intellectual accomplishment, and that was the architecture. And he said, and then the third was entering the monastery and pursuing his spiritual goal. And he would talk often, which we would not hear before this time. He would talk often about, how important it was for him to have some sort of realization before he passed away. It was the most important thing to him. And he did that. He had, and I'm sure the family probably knows this, tremendous capacity for enduring this pain and this suffering. I mean, it was amazing. He, even up until nearly the very end, when he could barely get up out of bed, he would always say, "Let me try first," before we'd give him a hand. And I could tell that at times the pain he was bearing was really quite a bit. And he was not stoic. He would cry out, but he was very much containing it, and it was amazing. The last 2 things I want to mention are just in the last week of his life. A picture of Holy Mother, who was right here, was placed next to his bed. And he immediately took great comfort in that. enjoyed looking at it. A smile would come on his face. He would look at the pictures, say, "Mother is smiling at me," and be happy. And then I was there. I have to explain, as he got into bed, because his mentality had decreased, he had a formula for getting into bed, and that formula involved putting his feet up, and then he had an alarm clock on the table. And that alarm clock, he'd say, "Now I have to turn so I can see that." And we'd say, "Yes," And he said to me one afternoon, "I have to turn so I can see that." And I said, "Yes." He said, "The alarm clock is my reference." And I said, "Yes, the alarm clock is your reference." "Okay, it's my reference." He got into bed. He turned over. He started to doze off. I was sitting there. And all of a sudden, he kind of roused. And he said to me in an animated voice, he said, "Holy Mother is my reference." And he said it again. He said, "Holy Mother is my reference." And then he said to me, he demanded, he says, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And I said, "Yes, Shanti, I understand." So that was the end of, his last days. So we know he had some comfort. He passed away, from our point of view, peacefully. That entire afternoon he was unconscious, and the breathing was winding down. So, that last afternoon, I believe, he was peaceful. Nothing going on. So that's all I have to say right now. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all very, very much for coming. My name is Swami Atmajayananda. Many of you will know me as Ben. Ben is my legal name. Swami Atmajayananda is my monastic name, just as Swami Atmajayananda received his when he took his final vows. I just want to relate that when I first met Harold, that's how I knew him at that time, that was in 1981. I was driving down from Vancouver, BC, in search of, I guess, a Vedanta society that I had read about prior to that. And he was the first one I met when I rang the doorbell. And at that time, it was in the middle of summer, 81, and I just driven about 150 miles. About 12:30 in the afternoon. The first person that actually answered the door kind of scolded me ahead for not calling before I came, because it's the middle of lunch. But then he said, "Well, I'll get someone to talk to you." And that was Harold, Swami Atmajayananda. And at that time, Swami Bhaskarnanda, who is the head of the center, was in Hawaii, meeting another group of devotees there. So I talked to Harold at the time. He was very friendly and outgoing and wasn't upset that I came at lunchtime, delaying him from his lunch. So we just talked about, I didn't tell him I came from Vancouver because I didn't really know what kind of place this was. I didn't protect my privacy kind of thing. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be hounded by advertisements, or I wasn't sure if this was like the Hare Krishna at that time, basically. So I was trying to be a little careful. But he was quite welcoming and everything, and that encouraged me to keep coming. And I did that. I drove down here a couple of times each month on the weekends to attend the lectures. But as I got to know him, one thing that I was impressed about was his discipline. He would always get up at 4 or 4:30 a.m., regardless of how he felt. And he'd go to the shrine, do his prayers and his meditation. And I was surprised by his endurance, even though at times he might fall asleep in the shrine, but still the discipline of getting up at that time, regardless of how he felt, whether he was sick or not, it seemed like he was determined. In fact, he was determined even to his last days. And when he was here to the month of December, I had to keep reminding him that he doesn't have to get up at 4:30 to do his prayers, because he needed the sleep and the rest. And so, but I also noticed that when he would get up at those times, he was also the first person in the kitchen to either where he would do his studying and his reading. But then when we would show up for breakfast, we would notice that the fruit of the table has been rearranged in some artistic form. And so that's how we knew he was there. So he would arrange the oranges, he would do shapes, and then he would take photographs. So the picture on the screen here is one of his many thousands of photographs that he has taken. And he spent a lot of time stitching photographs together to make panoramas. And nature was one of his favorite things to do that with. He would play for most of it, like we have our Sunday musical programs. We sing songs in the evening, and we have our worship service every day. And when he could play the flute, he would always love to bring the flute and play, although not always perfectly, but still, that was his service, I would say, to as an offering to God. Now, as far as his last days were here, that's probably when I kind of realized his heroism. Just as Scott had mentioned, you don't hear him complaining, but he would always try to remember that he was not the body, but the soul. So he would write down everywhere on notepads stuck on the wall on his desk the word soul. And he would say that to himself when he's feeling pain, and that would actually help him feel relieved of the pain. And I also thought, we should probably put a picture of Holy Mother next to his clock, because he was always staring at his clock. And that's when I said, when he was feeling at his worst, and he was looking at the clock, and I would tell him, don't look at the clock, pay attention to the Holy Mother. Think of that as being your comfort. And he would say, yes, you're right. So, and then I would ask him to remember to chant his mantra and whatever, try to remember his spiritual ideal. Because when you're in that state of pain, I could see that the moments of forgetfulness, but just those reminders kind of like calmed him down. So I wouldn't have to give him the morphine or the methadone. That would suffice. And again, if you asked him if he had pain, he might say no. But then we say, well, you look like you might be in pain. And then he said, well, I'm controlling it. So he didn't want to take the drugs unnecessarily, but he wanted to feel like he had some mastery or control over his emotion or his pain and that kind of, and his suffering. And I would say that's when I kind of realized that one has to be brave when one approaches death, and that was one of the ways. So if anyone else might like to come up and express anything they might remember about him, you are quite welcome.
My name is Rand, and I'm Harold's cousin. And his brother is sitting here. And I knew Harold from my childhood and throughout our lives. We didn't see each other a whole lot. Once he got involved with Vedanta, he was away. He was doing his thing. And but as a kid, I remembered we grew up the same family. Our grandfather, one of our grandfathers, was a Norwegian immigrant, and he was a tough old guy. He built houses, and he built. He was he was an artist in his own way. When he wasn't building houses during the day, he was making furniture in his basement at night. He ended up one of the last projects that, or things that he was into was he made violins, and he had I think he told Harold or his brother Roy that he had discovered. I think Harold told me this, that he had discovered something to make violins, just like Stradivarius. He'd come across some technique, and so he was determined he was going to create these violins. And I remember all of us kids, Harold and Shanti and Roy were a bit older than me. Harold was 10 years older, and so it was like we saw them at Christmas, and it was always like really cool to be around the big kids. And I think there was one Christmas we'd all gather at our grandfather's house, and I remember there was one year where it was either Roy or Harold, I don't remember who, gave me this toy airplane. It was like a wind-up with a rubber band, and I remember that was just the coolest thing ever. And I'd try and fly it around the house. But and Harold was there's a lot of artists in our family, and Harold was definitely one of them. I don't know if you ever have a chance to see up at the retreat up in Arlington. He designed this. I mean, he's designed many different structures, and some of them I've just seen pictures of them. I haven't seen very many of them. I haven't seen the ones at the retreat down in Portland. But I've seen pictures, and I just thought, wow, how do you come up with this stuff? He was just very clever, and the gate that he built up at your retreat up at Arlington is just. I'm a builder myself, and my father was an architect, and Harold actually had worked for my father in Seattle for, I don't know, a year or two when he was pursuing architecture. So I appreciate those things, his sense of proportion, the detail that he incorporated, and the sensitivity of materials. He was really a very skilled and sensitive designer, so I don't want to go on too long. I know Roy is getting a little tired sitting here. Maybe we need to stand up here in a minute, but anyway, it's very heartening to see everyone here for this service, and thank you, Ben and Scott, for putting this together. I know Harold really appreciated all your support, and he was very, very loved in his community that I look at as his second family. So, thank you all for coming.
Hello all, my name is Sundar. My wife Prabha and Jonathan, we were very much blessed to have Swami Shanti's company one-on-one for many number of years at the retreat center. And my son was very small. we didn't have anybody here. We were by ourselves, no family, no friends, no education. He was a great inspiration for our well-being in spiritual inspiration and in general as well. So we do really miss him, but he has gone to, he has gone on his soul elevation process. So I thank him for all what he gave us from his heart and mind. Thank you.
My name is Usha Sankriti, and I'm actually the chairman of the board for the Vedanta Society. And on behalf of the Vedanta Society, I wanted to express our heartfelt sadness as well as relief with Swami Atmajayananda. Personally, we've known Swami Atmajayananda from the time he became a resident here at the Seattle Center in the 1990s. And what sort of stands out for us is the way that he would usher everybody in. Sunday mornings, before the lecture, anybody who would walk in would be greeted by his bright smile and a very welcoming attitude, which sort of started our day and the lecture here, which sort of stood out for all of us. There were three things that sort of stood out for our family. One is every time we had the opportunity sort of to talk to Shanti Maharaj, he always would go on this sort of intellectual journey. And his favorite sort of philosophers would be some of the well-known German philosophers like Schopenhauer and some of the not-so-well-known German philosophers who he sort of introduced to us. And he would sort of try to connect philosophy with science and sort of weave, I would say, a semblance of some philosophy or philosophical discussion, which I would say was way, way, way beyond my understanding. However, it would intrigue me to an extent that I would go home and sort of look some of those up to see how do I make sense of some of the things that he had said, which in his mind was very, very clear. And I always marveled his intellectual capabilities and something that would intrigue me every time I came here and met with him. The second thing about Shanti Maharaj, I would say, is when you do talk to him, he would sort of talk about different structures, etc. And it was only after a couple of conversations with him that I came to realize that he had a background in architecture, because he was very, very detailed. His drawings were phenomenal. And I would say, we were trying, Mitra, my husband, he would do some drawings for patents. So I've sort of seen him do some of those drawings, but it would take a lot of time and thought. But Shanti would just pick up a piece of paper, and he was able to draw some of those with ease. And so that was the other thing I learned from him, especially Frank Lloyd, that he had sort of constructed or designed his home, was one of his passions. The third thing, and something that sort of hits me home, is him being a flautist. My son was a flautist. He started playing the flute when he was 3. He received a lot of encouragement from Shanti regarding the techniques of how to play the flute, and including his passion for his flute, which is a pearl flute. There are different kinds of flutes. And I learned all the intricacies of the pearl flute. And to that, I'm very, very grateful. And he wanted to perform with I would say, a choir or, say, a trio of flautists. And we had Jane, who was a very well-known flautist and played with several symphonies in the Seattle area. And so he, along with Jane and my son, were able to perform on some of the Vedanta musical evenings. And after that, Shanti would come to me and say, "Oh, I know he played very well." And I thought to myself, he's a novice flautist, but it's nice to get that sort of compliment from someone who had played the flute for so long. That being said, I'm going to conclude with just 2 events that took place recently. We went and saw Shanti at the retreat after he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and he was not feeling too well, and he was in a tremendous amount of pain. My husband and I had gone in, and he wanted to have some medical conversations with me because of my background of being a doctor. And he wanted some clarifications regarding his medication, his disease process, etc., which I was able to give him in sort of a medical way. At the end of the conversation, we went back into the kitchen. We said bid goodbye to Shanti and just went back to the kitchen. And lo and behold, after about 5 minutes, there's another resident at the retreat called Ashi. He comes in with a book, which was signed by Shanti, and he had neatly sort of wrapped it in a paper towel, like a gift wrap, and gave it to Mitra and me, saying, I want you to have this. And what was that book? It was one of his most favorite books regarding the philosophy of one of the German philosophers, which I'm sure we'll be cherishing that. And that was a very thoughtful thing for him to do, despite his illness. And then we also had the good fortune of seeing him on Christmas Eve when we were here for the celebrations, just about a week or two prior to his passing away. And the minute he saw me, he was in tremendous pain, and I could hear that right outside the door. As soon as he saw me, he jumps up and he goes, hello, Usha. It's so nice to see you. And I thought to myself, my God, I just heard him in pain the minute before. And he was able to forget that body, the body consciousness, and be able to recognize me, even, say, during his last days. So he's someone to be remembered. And so with that, I would say, I just want to end with a little prayer, which is what we say in our Indian philosophy. It's about peace. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace to everyone. Thank you.
I'll be very short. Sujata, my wife and my son and daughter Korok and Gunja and I, we know Swami Atmajayananda from 2002. 2002 when we came here. There are a lot of interesting things to talk about him, but a couple of things I would say. And I think he used to like snacks and sweets, which I knew. And he used to like cooking, cook food cooked at site. So last time when I was with him, he said, can you put some food in a plate and bring it to me so that I can eat when I like at night? So that was one thing. A couple of months back in 2022, when I was in the retreat, he told me, when you go from here to home, can you all the time chant soul, soul, soul? And I didn't know why he was asking that. And I was in the car, and I was remembering that he told me to do that. So I was saying, soul, soul. And Sujata told me, what are you doing? I said, Swami told me to chant soul, soul, soul all the time I go. So I was forgetting, and I was doing that again and again. So I did that. And before he was moved to retreat, he gave me a little yellow sticky note pad, and he wrote, can you get me a clock and a block of cheese? And then I had to go to India, and I forgot it. But when I came back, I had that note on my table and I remembered it. So 2 days before he passed away, at least I was able to bring that clock and a block of cheese to the temple. I don't know whether he saw it or not, but at least I was able to do it.
He did.
Yeah. So,
and the clock is with me now.
Thank you. So we have a lot of memories to cherish, with him, and there are a lot of interesting stories, and we are really grateful that we came in contact with him through the center. Thank you.
Andy.
My name is Andy. I've been a devotee here for some over 20 years. And obviously there are many stories that, I've had so many interactions with Shanti Maharaj throughout those years. But what I want to share is just an inspiring incident that was my last interaction with him. I visited him in person about 2 weeks before he passed away. And it's always of a lot of interest to me to just see how are people when they're near death, because I think that one of the things that one of the major attractions of religion is that it can give us a way to kind of figure out how are we going to deal with that sort of, generally scary thing of death. And Usha was just chanting that beautiful prayer, from that ends with from death lead us to immortality. So anyway, he talked to me about a few different things, and this is just over the course of a few minutes. But then he said, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said that this body is just doing what bodies do. It was never expected to last forever. And just always remember that you are the soul. And that left an impression on me. And I think anytime someone says something like that, especially someone who's actually dedicated their life to practicing those sorts of ideals, that's going to leave an impression. But when they're able to say that in the moments before death, I don't know, to me that's an inspiration, and it tells me, like, maybe I could do that too.
Raka? She knew him since you were a kid. Still is.
Hi everyone, my name is Raka. I grew up here, so Uncle Shanti was one of my uncles, very cherished. We used to always play. My main memories of him are we used to do the Christmas Eve service together, and he was always so happy to play the flute, and I would play the piano. And then, I remember there was another time that we had a little duet, so I just remember his joy in sharing music together. That's really the thing I remember from all those. Year after year, we always did that together. So, and every time I would come up to the retreat, he was just always there to greet me with a smile. I think all of the children who grew up here also will remember his just very welcoming and kind presence. So.
You like that?
We can conclude with a.
I'm sure he has touched most of us. And these are all personal memories we cherish. And let us grow in those moments of interaction with him. Because ultimately he had dedicated himself to the Lord, and those memories are tinged with those divine things. So he will live forever in our memories, and we hope that
Go to the microphone.
I hope that he will continue to inspire us like the way he has inspired so many people. I remember him when I came 3 years ago, and he's saying, you'll be good here. I said, because I had come from LA. I said, and then when I finally ended up here, I said, there you are. I said, yeah, you expressed your wish that I would be here, and well, I'm here, and maybe the Lord wants to fructify your wishes. It wasn't my wish, for sure. And he was a deep soul. And like I said, every time he wanted to mention soul, he said, I want you to just say soul and soul. I said, I'm going to add something more to it. You are a soul, and Ramakrishna is a soul of your soul. And that sparked his kind of another train of thought. Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true. So though my interaction with him was brief, I used to occasionally go to the retreat because of his ill health. And I was surprised when I first saw him after coming here, the second time, that how broken he was. And yet, his spirit wasn't broken. And I marveled at it. And every time I went out there, even telling him sometimes difficult things, unpalatable things, he always smiled, and I knew that I was right about his spirit being unbroken. That is the lesson that I learned from him. And I have seen some remarkable monks in India, remarkable. And I could class him also amongst one of them. Thank you. Om, peace, peace, peace. Ben will chant and sing us a closing song.
Yeah, we'll have a closing song. It'll be on page 69.
Yeah.
It'll be a more upbeat song, only one. We are one, there is one, only one. We are all branches of one tree. We are one with all that we see. We are one with the wind, we are one with the sand. We are mountain and grassland green. We are one with the vast unseen. We are one with the sun and the we are one with the sun. Oh, pardon me. We are one with the sun and the. Oh, sorry. One with the flow and all that will grow. We are one with the sky and sea. You are one with me. We are one with the sun, one with all joy and pain. We are one with the snow and with all that will grow. We are one, the sky and sea. We are one with eternity. We are one with eternity. We are one with eternity. Well, thank you for covering for me. Okay. Thank you again all very much for coming today.
Here, I'll hold it. I can hold it for you.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here and
Here, I'm gonna take this down and you can speak a little easier.
and experience Harold's life through himself and through others. He's a man of many talents, and he found a way at Vedanta to express his interest in what he thought of the world, and he was a remarkable. I'm Harold's brother, by the way. we had a good karma together. We were good for each other, and it's nice to appreciate his. Nice for us to appreciate his life in all its depths, and I think we look back on his life as a good advantage or a good thing to do. To reorganize him in his thoughts and interests. He had a very broad sense of interest, from building houses to building parts of houses and architecture, and he encouraged me to become an architect as well, which is what I did as a living. So I'm his brother and his architect guru, I guess. There were lots of discussions on architecture and the theories and so forth, and building up. He's involved in a number of renowned buildings. So I know he'll be an inspiration to me going ahead, and I think I will remember him a great deal as an inspiration as I enter my elder life. So, and to remember him, Harold, in his life too. So, I'd like to thank Swami that he has great depth of in his abilities. So there's probably more that I could say that because there's more to all his life with lessons so long with me as a brother. And if anything reason comes up for discussing something Harold has done or did, just give me a call. So I'll say goodnight. Probably other opportunities coming up. So let's see. How do you put this back together again?
Here, we'll put it back over here. Thank you.
Another thing I forgot to mention, he was very lucid till the very end. Very lucid. I mean, his mind was so clear. Generally, when you're racked with pain, you're distressed, you lose sense of, you can say, time and you can say balance. But he was very lucid. In fact, he grew more lucid as time was kind of passing by for him. And one of those things I really appreciated also, that he was, yes, lucid till the end. And as I say, his name was Peace. He merged in that final peace. As Ben spoke, peace like a river flowing away. So so thank you very much for being here with us to honor not only Swami Atmajayananda Harold, but to honor also that life which he dedicated for Vedanta. And as Andy says, he wanted to see what Vedanta, what religion does. We had a Nigerian nurse, Kenyan or Nigerian nurse? Kenyan nurse. And she spoke some wonderful truths, and towards the end, Ben was there saying, the way we live is the way we die. And I said, get her here. That's pure Vedanta. Yeah, so he was fortunate to have had you people around him. It's always the people that makes a difference in lives. Oh yes. And we had all these wonderful devotees with him, supportive, and like saying, wants a clock and cheese. Yeah, you get it for him. So he was spiritually enriched, and as I said, he enriched us all. Thank you very much for being here in honor of memory and to honor that Vedanta, that life that he lived. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Om, peace, peace, peace. And everything that we have done, we offer it to the Lord Shri Ram Krishna. Thank you.